legit like animated short series on YouTube that
Mm,
Bleacher Report and I think State Farm was paying for.
mm.
But it was like a parody of Game of Thrones, but
Yeah.
then they played with sort of the NBA.
What was happening at the moment?
Yeah, like dude, the 1 year where like the first episode of a season started on like the House of the Warriors or whatever, and they were all doing it. Apparently, the Warriors submit all of that shit to the writers of Game of Zones because they were like, "We fucking love this shit. Like, this is the gossip going on right now at training camp. Like, use it in the show." Um, but the reason I bring it up is, have you seen Game of Thrones now?
Of course.
Okay, so like you know how like it ends with fucking Bran becoming the king.
Yeah, yeah,
Spoiler,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
If you haven't watched the end of Game of Thrones, I
This is
just
their own fault.
saved you it. All right. Trust that I saved you. But Bran essentially becomes the king, and everyone's like, the fuck? Really?
Yeah.
Game of Zones, you know how it ends. They make Paul Pierce the king, as in like the goat. So they like that's the claim. And honestly, like as someone who thinks Paul Pierce is absolute trash, like
Because you're an anti-Celtic fan.
no, I'm an anti-wuss fan. And it's a paradox because I'm a soccer fan and I know soccer players are like massive wussies, but like, oh man, don't you ever get carted off on a wheelchair only to come back. Like, don't you ever do that in front of me because I will make fun of you. Like, talk to Austin Rivers because I own real estate in that man's head. But I digress. So, like, if anything, that just tells me that the creators of Game of Thrones like get it. Like, they're like, yo, Paul Pierce is so obnoxious, and like the only way we could like obnoxiously end this series in the same absurd way that Game of Thrones did in making Bran the king is by saying that Paul Pierce is the GOAT over players like LeBron, Kobe, or even Michael Jordan. You see
So
what I'm saying?
that was after Game of Thrones was over.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a very well played.
Yeah. But if you are tuning in, thank you and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin Ballers podcast. I'm your host Q, joined by my co-host, the man who's dunking over fools in rec league basketball, Sir Ulric. How goes it, my friend?
What's up, man? What's up? Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if I can I spend 10 seconds to celebrate my little dunk that I had on
Oh yeah, let's do
last
this.
week?
Okay, wait, I'm gonna do this because I ate my words. I made fun of Ulrich saying that he can't freaking dunk at his age because I was jealous because I'm broken. Boom! Let's do it one more time. And gets the pass. Go another lean in. Boom!
Show him the gritty. Show him the gritty.
Absolute domination. Absolute domination. Well
I
done,
took
sir.
I
Well
took
done.
two ibuprofen before that game, so I was making sure my knees were tight and right.
Hey, what I really want to know is how many ibuprofen you got to take after the game.
Actually, I was so hyped on that. I was like, there was no pain. So that's all I needed, just a little bit. But that's funny. I got the MRI last week, and I just have this chronic bursitis, the old man knee, and it's just something that's just going to happen to you when you get 39. If it ain't happened to you already, young
Bro, I'm still nursing my health back from a torn Achilles. So don't you tell me about your body breaking down. All I did was pull up for the jumper. That's all I did was pull up for a jumper.
That's so sad.
Don't tell me about.
Hey, consider that rest time. So you're just saving your legs, and then come back with the MVP season like KD does.
All right. Maybe. I'm bitter still. But we got a jam-packed episode for you all. We will be getting into all things Western Conference playoff pictures because the Eastern Conference playoff picture literally didn't change. We'll talk a little bit about it, but the West is really heating up, because it's the best conference, best coast. I don't make the rules. I just live by them. And of course, we will go over some injuries, latest news. Of course, we're going to talk LeBron James and my Lakers because this is my show and we will always talk about the Lakers on the show. But let's kick things off exactly where we started them. Paul Pierce. Now, bias, my personal feelings aside, he was a solid dude, like a solid NBA player who, in my opinion, probably his career overachieved. I would say certain things like, oh, you're the Celtics leading scorer all time? Who were your teammates the first 10 years of your career? Like he
Walker.
played, he literally didn't have a Hall of Fame caliber teammate until Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen showed up in 2007. So
Is
I
that a
would
shot to him?
no, it's simply a point I want to make because like full stop. Who is an all better player? Like who would you rather have on your team from the start of their career to the end? Paul Pierce or Larry Bird?
Larry Bird.
Who would you rather have? Paul Pierce, Jason Tatum?
I mean, you don't know what the future holds for him.
I would rather have the unknown of Jason Tatum.
Okay.
Like
Sure.
Jason Tatum could literally never do anything else for the rest of his career, and I'm willing to take that risk over just what Paul Pierce's career was.
Yeah.
So, at least to me, that reads as though you have a guy who essentially just was the best player on a great organization during their down years. They didn't do jack shit until Kevin Garnett showed up. So, like that's why Paul Pierce, in my opinion, is the Celtics' all-time leading scorer. Like over,
Don't discount him against one of the top players of all time. I have Larry Bird on my list is at 20, and Jason Tatum is definitely.
but that like didn't you even say before we started? Paul Pierce is 45 in your list. Larry Bird is 20. I'm
That is
taking
correct.
Larry Bird over Paul. You're taking Larry Bird over Paul.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is, Larry Bird he didn't need to score as much on those Celtic teams because he had a cast, and
But
that's not a knock on
he
Paul
did
Pierce.
score. But he did, even though like he didn't need to score, he's yet still average more per game than Paul Pierce. So that shows how great Larry was, not necessarily how bad Paul Pierce was.
No, I just think I think and the easiest, and I will always make fun of him because it's the perfect example, and because you A/B tested it to the T with a player like Kevin Love. Dude was grabbing 30 boards
on the
on a Timberwolves team that had no one else. So it was like, yeah, no shit, someone's got to grab these rebounds. And then, sure, he became third fiddle to the Cavs. Okay, what about when LeBron left? He was second fiddle. Still wasn't doing those type of numbers. Never again. Oh, he's past his prime. Sure, he had opportunities. He had plenty of opportunities. Just the NBA players are a caliber of players who, dude, any of these guys could go off for 30 points if, the system was built to feed them the ball. Genuinely. There are some players who obviously are like defensive specialists, and there are some players who are just like pure wet shooters. So you should probably err on that statement, siding on like those shooter scorer type players. But genuinely, if you were just the best player on the team, you're just like
the numbers are going to materialize.
Like all time. Like I'm just gonna throw numbers out my head, out my ass for a second, but we're gonna talk post shot clock era NBA because obviously pre shot clock era, like there were some scores that were sub 50 for both teams, but post shot clock era, teams are, especially at this point, teams are averaging over 70 points a game very consistently. Like a lot of teams are averaging closer to 80, 90 points now, but go back 20 years, sure, it was more closer to 70 points. They weren't shooting as many threes. The scores were a little lower.
Are you saying people are averaging 80 and 90 points now in games?
Teams
are all average. Even the losing teams are averaging 100 now.
You go.
You're so old school, man. I know you missed the mid 90s, man. But
dude.
Dude,
I do.
I'm like, wait, what?
I do. I miss when they played defense.
Which makes David Robinson so great because he was averaging 28 points a game in a time when they were scoring.
You're not talking to me about David Robinson right now. I got one obnoxious player to deal with. Let's deal with the Paul Pierce of it, and then we can So the story here, why we're talking about it. So Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett are just sort of talking to each other, and the only clip, I didn't watch the interview because like I love Kevin Garnett, genuinely, like one of my favorite players. I thought he was going to be a Laker at one point, like was so hurt that the trade went to the Celtics. But he was interviewing Paul Pierce. They were just talking over some things, and Richard Jefferson's name comes up. And
They're just toxic.
the word that Paul Pierce used was sweet. And like the takes were so bad on both sides, in my opinion. Paul Pierce is like, yo, I dropped 40 on him easy 40 points every time. And then Richard Jefferson goes, sweet, bro, what's your definition of sweet? You beat me one time in your entire career. And like pulls up the receipts. All I gotta say on that whole debacle, and I said this to you earlier, these are just two like mid-level guys from a generation that like I don't really give a shit about who are beefing. And it's like, dude, Paul Pierce, you are not even in the conversation of a certain tier from your like Tracy McGrady, way above you, in my opinion. I know your rankings don't have that. Fine. Vince Carter.
I understand, but I understand what you're talking about. Like, yeah, McGrady.
Like in that era, who are you? Like I was turning on the TV to watch Tracy McGrady. I was turning on the TV to watch Vince Carter. I never circled a Celtics game, and it wasn't out of hatred. It was just like you're not a fun player to watch. Like,
but for the same reasons that you discount Paul Pierce in his early days are the same reasons you're celebrating guys like Vince Carter or McGrady. They entertained you, but they did not win. And
Paul dance Pierce, for me, my puppets. I didn't want them to win. I wanted my Lakers to win.
I just saw another Vince Carter dunk highlight video 2 days ago, and I'm just like, ooh, send it to all my friends on Instagram. It still looks hot, man, and it's great. But I remember seeing a couple of those dunks when you see the little score in the bottom right, and they're losing by 11 with 1 minute to go in the fourth quarter, and it's like, it's rosy colored memories because we didn't expect Vince Carter to win. And that's the thing. Like, we have to make sure we judge all these players by the same foundational principles. And I understand, like, when I see Richard Jefferson arguing with Paul Pierce making fun of him because he knows he has the high ground. You know, he's better. He scored more, could shoot better, had more options, had the green light all the time. Richard Jefferson was a role player half his career.
No, but Richard Jefferson was a role player his whole career. Yeah, he was never the dude. Even when he was on the Nets, he wasn't the dude. That was Jason Kidd's team.
He had 2 years. I'm looking at the stats right now. He had 2 years over 22 points a game. He had 2 other years where he was averaging 19. He was a solid number 2 option. Did he make the All-Star game ever?
Yeah.
He's actually never an All-Star.
No shit. All right, so then he was never the dude. So you can never say he was the dude if you're not an All-Star.
That's right. And that's the thing. Like, he is an okay solid player. He's a role player. But he's a very good role player for some of his career. Paul Pierce wins that. When Richard Jefferson said, "Yeah, but we beat you," like, you know, sometimes you just have to take the shit talk and let the chips and just let, okay, it's like, okay, roll your eyes and move on, which is what his best response. I watched the what is it called? The clutchpoints.com when he responded. He said, I think his best point was where he said, I'm done with this. I got a job to do, which is so funny because ESPN had fired Paul Pierce a few years ago, and he knew that. So he was, Richard Jefferson is smart. So he had the last laugh. But when you look at the stats, there's no comparison. But Paul Pierce is just some bitter dude that's trying to be memorized, trying to be remembered. He reminds me of a younger Charles Barkley, where he's saying, like, back in my day, I'm big time that.
That is such a diss.
It's like, but you know what? Charles Barkley is great. And you know what? I still say Paul Pierce was a great player. He scored when he had to. He took a step down when he had to. Even his step down was still like, I'm putting up numbers in a championship fashion. He was still the leading scorer, or splitting the leading scorer role on that team. I think Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett, they all averaged like 18 and 19 together. It was the original big three. They did a good job of making it to the finals, winning one. And he's going to be remembered, just not at the level of Kobe Bryant or Kevin Garnett and other contemporaries. And that's just what it is.
So, couple things that I found really funny that I was looking up while you were sharing that take. Richard Jefferson, the 2 years that you alluded to where he averaged 22 points, he was the second leading scorer on the team. You know who the first
Let me
was?
guess. I'm not even going to look. Kenyon Martin?
No, bro. We already said his name on this show.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vince Carter. That's right. What a squad. I mean, that's a good squad.
Dude, honestly, that Nets team with Vince Carter, I was disappointed never made the finals.
They did make the finals.
No,
Wait.
not with Vince. They made the finals without Vince 2 years in a row.
Okay, so it's
And
kids.
they got swept
Yeah,
by the Lakers, and then they went 6 games with the Spurs.
Something like that. I was back then when I was a real Laker fan, I couldn't watch those finals when the Lakers lost because it's like, who wants to watch the Spurs? So I boycotted.
Oh, dude, I hated the Spurs then. All right, Chris, I hear you. We will address.
Is Chris from Boston?
Like,
why is he bringing up Rajon Rondo?
I mean,
he's too young for that.
I mean, look, Rondo, like I remember Rondo when they got KG and he was like still like learning how to become a real floor jet. Like the first finals, that was not Rondo's finals. That finals where it went 7 games with the Lakers, like that was at that point, that was Rondo's team. That wasn't even Paul Pierce's team. That was Rondo's team, in my opinion. And look, I will hammer this point home forever. I can't fathomably hold it against players like, I mean, look, the history speaks for itself. Like the KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen experiment in Boston was a success. The Vince Carter in New Jersey wasn't a success. They didn't even make the finals. The Tracy McGrady in Houston with Yao Ming wasn't a success. Like they never even made it out of the second round of the playoffs. So there's a case to be made that like these guys did have the chance. They weren't always just on, like Vince wasn't always on Toronto with no help, you know. T-Mac wasn't always in Houston. Like he was in Orlando originally when he was leading the league in scoring, again, with no help, which tends to, in that era of the NBA, was how you almost led the NBA. Scored. Kobe, very similar. The years that he was the NBA's leading scorer were the years after Shaq, before Pau Gasol. When you are on a bad team, but you're a great player, you pick up that slack. So I think I'm almost convincing myself that like I'll allow Paul Pierce to have this moment. Ultimately, though,
Chris Bosh too.
Who?
Chris Bosh did the same thing when he was in Toronto.
Yeah, valid. But I like Chris Bosh. I'm like, and Chris Bosh didn't cry like a little bitch and then return to the NBA. Like Chris Bosh had such crazy health issues that he was just forced to retire. Paul Pierce cried like a little baby. Oh, I need a wheelchair. It can't work. Oh, I'm ready. I'm coming back and I'm gonna score.
The wheelchair, man.
Dude, wheelchair Paul Pierce has to go down as one of the most obnoxious NBA players to ever play the game of basketball.
Yeah.
And he was good. That was peak Paul Pierce. Wheelchair Paul Pierce was the best hit. That was the best moment of his career.
Yeah.
Better than the 2 years before when they won the actual finals. That wheelchair Paul Pierce. That was it. Ever since then, it's been downhill for him. There's another side of this too, where like what side of this argument do you take now? Because on the one hand, I'm just spitballing here. I don't think he actually averaged 40 points a game against Richard Jefferson throughout his career. But let's say, for argument's sake, like he had an above his career scoring average against Richard Jefferson, who was a 3-and-D guy before you knew actually what that terminology was. Like Richard Jefferson was your defensive stopper. And so do you think it's more valuable that Paul Pierce, the individual, played better against Richard Jefferson? Or do you think it's more valuable that Richard Jefferson's team beat Paul Pierce's team?
Well, I mean, it's all about the perspective you want to take. You know, it's basically, if he wants to say that a regular season matchup matters so significantly that he meaning Richard Jefferson that he felt the need to bring it up, then so be it. This is the problem where people have all these different ways of judging greatness. Paul Pierce wants to bring up points, and for the record, he averaged 20 points and 6 rebounds according to StatMuse. You can pull that up on your own. But so Paul Pierce brings up points. Richard Jefferson brings up team wins in the regular season. Another guy may bring up, yeah, but we beat you in the conference semifinals twice. Another guy may say, well, I have more rings. So it all matters to what kind of perspective you want to take of what constitutes greatness for the game of basketball. There's a bunch of different ways to skin a cat. In my opinion, when you look back, Paul Pierce was a critical piece of a championship team and an NBA Finals participant. He went deep in the playoffs multiple times. He has many seasons with 25 more points, 25 points a game. And Richard Jefferson, yeah, he's a very solid role player. There's no contest. I wish people would stop bringing up, yeah, but we won. I don't need to hear about how many playoff series Robert Horry won. Don't need to hear how many championship rings Draymond Green got. You aren't the dog. So, just enjoy the ride and try to argue your game with people at your tier, and that's okay. I won
the message here is stay in your lane.
I won the Drew League in 2009. You can go look at Washington Park. My name is hanging in the rafters at that park in the middle of LA. I'm not saying that I'm comparing to the league MVP or or James Harden or Kobe Bryant who played in the Drew. Did they win the Drew League championship? No, never. But I won. What does that mean? Jack shit.
All right. I got it. I love you, bro. I should not have hyped you up as much as I did over the dunk. Clearly, it's gone to your head.
I won the Drew League in 2009. Look it up. Acts about me.
Man.
So guess what? I can't compare. I ain't out there
You just
comparing
went
myself.
on a rant. Hang on. I want to establish this because this was a journey you took me on, my friend. So you essentially told Richard Jefferson, yo, motherfucker, stay in your lane. Like, compare yourself to the other role players. And then you went ahead and tried to say that because you won the Drew League, you were then comparable to all the great players.
No, I said I'm not. Listen close, bro. Like, do your research or something. What other kind of Bitcoin phrase can I bring into this? You're not paying attention to the details. I said I am not like those guys, but I would never compare myself just because
But just because you said you're not like them, you put your name in the same breath as them for a reason. Like, you ain't pulling a fast one on me, guy. Like, what? What? Stay in your lane, bro. Let's go. Let's move on over though.
I can't slip one by you.
I'm gonna ignore the statement that the Celtics big three was the original big three because, like, look, I would argue that why Magic, Worthy, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a bigger, better, badder big three than the Celtics.
Magic, Worthy, and Jabbar. Who are you saying big three? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, they didn't really call that thing. They didn't coin that phrase back then. And when we're saying big three, it's almost like it's three people from their own corners of the league coming together to form this. It's the super team big three.
I get it. No, yeah, I get how it got coined, but I would forever argue, like, bro, I'm taking my Worthy, Magic, Kareem big three over that KG. You can give them KG and Ray Allen in their prime, not even when they were Celtics prime. Those guys,
100%.
I'm still taking Kareem, Magic, Worthy.
100%. We don't need to talk about
it. To talk some old heads for a second, Michael Jordan is in the news. Apparently exploring potentially selling his majority stake in the, oh my God, Charlotte Hornets. I spaced for a second there.
Yeah, not the Bobcats. Yeah. Right.
Like, there's a little bit of sadness that I have in the back of my head of, damn, like, I fuck with having Jordan be a team owner. I like that. There is though that side of the fact that how people like to knock Jordan, especially for the Wizard years when, hey man, you're hanging out a little too much, bro. And he's like a notoriously bad front office exec. He's a great drafter. He's actually a great drafter, but he's a terrible team builder. Like there have been some great players who either blew up in Charlotte or shout out my boy Malik Monk, like just came over to the Lakers and was like, yo, you guys let this guy walk?
And he's still
And then,
killing it in Sacramento
I
right
know, and then
now.
our dumbasses let
OMG.
him walk again. Like, oh my God, Pelinka. Oh,
Sacramento, second place.
that's gonna bite us in the ass when we have to play them in the first round of the playoffs.
Oh,
I know. But we'll get into that in a second. Look, there's prestige, man. Like when an owner calls a player, like it's one thing just to get that phone call, but then if that phone call is coming from Jordan, then you get to talk to MJ. You get to pick MJ's brain. Look, I come from an era of Kobe fans who knew and appreciated, especially as the stories were pouring out, that like Kobe really used MJ as a mentor, would pick his brain on everything and anything. I wonder genuinely if players like let's go back a little bit. Kemba Walker balled out, absolute balled out in Charlotte. How often do you think Kemba Walker was picking MJ's brain when he was on the Hornets?
When you're around great people of whatever function you're involved, whether it's engineering, whether it's media, whether it's basketball, or sports in general, you're knocking on that door constantly, because you understand the scarcity of that event, and it's not going to be around forever. So cherish it. And players will have a year with Jordan, they'll have 2 years with Jordan, and they're off to another team, and you may not be able to talk to him anymore because you guys you may not just have his phone number he may not have your phone number in his phone next year. I think it's a good opportunity to play under an icon like that, but at the same time, I think those players that are out there, learning from a lot of different greats, it's like, who did he have? He had a black coach that was coaching for a while. I forget, tall guy.
For the Hornets?
Yeah. Do you remember what his name was? Gosh.
It wasn't Nate McMillan, was it?
No, it wasn't McMillan. He's taller, I forget, but he was a player, and he was a player's coach. And it's like the knowledge that these guys have, but even still, like when you mentioned Nate McMillan, like he just got fired from the Hawks. He was back there playing with Peyton and Sean Kemp, and they were just, Ricky Pierce. And as much as you like to say, oh, I want to pick the brain of Jordan, there's so much to give from all of those players. So I would say that I wouldn't, even though Jordan is unique, I think it's more of a nostalgic fashion rather than, than applicable fashion. And you can get that applicable knowledge anywhere. In my opinion, the Jordan sale, Jordan's a businessman. I think he's making a good trade. He's selling the top. He's been with the team for a while. I'm pretty sure he's going to make a slick profit. Get your money.
It's also worth noting that, I mean, love him or hate him, former Commissioner David Stern definitely forced the hand of the previous owners to sort of be like, you're not going to own this team. It's going to be Michael Jordan.
Oh, the statism.
Like there was a degree of that, whether you believe that narrative or not. Like where there's smoke, there's fire. And I do think that the NBA, and rightfully so, in my opinion, I am a big believer that players should be actually given a percentage of the teams they play for, regardless of your status, because you build the organization, you build the history of it. And when they ship you away, fans will remember. Alex Caruso will forever live on as a Lakers legend, forever. He only stopped here for 3 years, but he delivered a championship, and his name may never go in the rafters, but real Lakers fans will always love and appreciate Alex Caruso. And like shout out Dr. Buss. Like he did the same thing for Magic. Magic, when he retired, was given a piece of the Lakers. Now, that's not a common thing. You're starting to see it more and more. You're starting to see a lot of the NBA players owning pieces of other sports franchises. We're having the conversations around Alex Rodriguez. He's closing in on owning the Minnesota Timberwolves. So it's not a foreign concept for these athletes to cross over into other sports. And then at the same time, you see this opportunity for retired players. Like, is Shaq still a partial owner of the Kings, or did he finally sell that stake?
The Kings.
He used to be a partial owner of the Sacramento Kings.
Oh, I don't even remember hearing that. Okay.
Yeah, like a very small, but like again, it's one of those things. Like these players, they want a piece of the league that they have built, and again, I believe they deserve it, and rightfully so. And maybe it's something where the NBA just sort of has to allocate. Hey, 5% of this team is not for you. It's not for sale. It is the NBA's property, and this goes back to the players eventually. Players have the right to buy in. We're not just handing it out. You have the right as a player to, not when you're playing, you can't, like, that would be weird. That would be a little weird in my opinion. But on your retirement, you have the right to buy in to a stake in the teams that you had a part of that you feel passionate for. So that's just an outsider's opinion on something like that.
I think that's a fair assessment. You'll never know how these rules come about, where who gets to buy and for what reason, and it's a very tight knit group. Whether you have the NFL or the NBA, MLB, the owners get to pick and choose who they want as their fraternity brothers or sisters, if you will. I would say that players that are industrious with their money and being savers and having low time preference, they will reap the benefit of the massive amounts of money that they gain on an annual basis, and hopefully they turn that into a share in something that's tangible and that can reap dividends for the future, for their offspring and themselves. But I think that's a nice gesture. Maybe the NBA will propose that. I don't have anything against that. Off the cuff, from a free market perspective, I came and talk about Austrian economics because the NBA is so far from that is technically wouldn't be a violation because they're violating it already.
This is like the most anti-free market take in my, like, I recognize
but it can't be because the NBA is already anti-free market. There's so many barriers to entry. It's not even funny. People say, "Hey, I got some money. I want to buy a team." They're like, "We don't like the way you look." No.
Well, there's I don't agree with that. Like I agree with you that happens. I think that there's a bigger thing that really goes on, and essentially what teams are realizing, at least these owners, the NBA has the fewest, with the exception of Major League Soccer, has the fewest amount of franchises with 30. Most other leagues have 32. You're only splitting a pot already with 30 teams. And then you also, on top of that, have the smallest roster size. The TV rights deals for the NBA are massive, ballooning and growing. Mm-hmm. Hence the cap space going up, hence these player contracts going up. But if you add 2 more teams, you just diluted the amount of money every team starts to get. So you actually eat in. And then on top of that too, there is a way you can calculate, and I've seen this done on a handful of articles that I'm going to just sort of steal the explanation of without getting into the details of how it's calculated. But they essentially show and prove that if you were to introduce 2 teams to the NBA, say like Seattle's always brought up as like, let's bring a team back there, and Vegas will eventually get a team. I do believe a team will go to Vegas. I think a team will move. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised the Clippers are building their stadium. I genuinely thought the Clippers were on their way to Seattle the second Ballmer bought the team. I would have helped them pack the fucking bags, but I digress. Say those 2 teams are brought in, the NBA reshuffles accordingly and all that, but we're talking a lot about valuations of teams. Most recently, we saw the Bucks sell to the family that owns the Browns as well at a very high valuation. Okay, Hawks are exploring about sale as well. Phoenix Suns just closed a deal, got a new owner at a very, very high valuation. The valuations will get dinged because
Yes.
you've also introduced two new teams. So you're not oversaturating. 30 versus 32 is not an
No, you're
oversaturation.
expanded by less than 10%, 5-6%. That's a chunk.
You essentially have diluted the market. And so there is this almost request that, sure, our teams are only worth $5 billion today. So the alleged cost to start a franchise is somewhere in the tune of like 8 or 9 billion, which is almost double the valuation of the top teams, except for like the Lakers, because it's just such an established brand. And I think the Knicks, like, that's an insane ask. Twice the value of what the team will literally be worth on the open market today. But the reason is the expectation is that in 10 years' time, that will actually be a fraction of what your team will be worth if the NBA continues to grow at the rate it is growing, which that might be a whole other thing.
Money printer.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's for the Bitcoin side of the podcast, but that's just sort of, I think, the financial logic that goes into why you're not seeing a team show up in Seattle or, like, frankly, in Las Vegas, where just more sports need to be in Las Vegas, and more sports will, from the aspect of sports betting becoming normalized in our day-to-day lives.
It's a tax. It's a tax to the current establishment. And why do they feel like they need to, why they don't feel the need to be taxed right now? That's it.
Oh, I get what you're saying. I was about to correct you and say tax from the current establishment to a new entrant, but I also get what you're saying, that it would tax them and their current valuation.
Just so they can expand the league. They're not missing anything.
Let's unless there's anything else you want to hit up about team ownership, I was gonna flip our script now to go over some injuries.
Yeah, let's do that.
Alrighty. So last week we talked a lot about the different injuries going on in the league. Obviously, Kevin Durant went out. We had Draw out indefinitely. We even brought up Luka Doncic, that at the time it was looking like day to day that he might play. He has not since played. He apparently will not be playing tonight against the Lakers. Kyrie Irving apparently is also out, may not be playing tonight against the Lakers, although he did warm up. So he is in the shoot around. So Kyrie might be playing, but Luka has officially been ruled out. A couple other notable ones just to bring up, Marcus Smart right now is day to day. He's sick. They're saying not COVID, but just something to keep an eye on. Malcolm Brogdon as well, day to day. His Achilles is sore. Rest that up, brother. You don't want to tear that. Trust me on that. Even though you're a Celtic, I'll give you that free bit of advice. And then the other big one. Oh, there was news that Ben Simmons is like progressing. I don't care, to be honest. Like, good for you, Benji. Like, get your shit together, bro. You're a professional athlete. Act like it. Jared Allen, Cleveland Cavaliers, out. This one's an interesting one. Lonzo Ball, we keep talking about it. It looks like his third surgery may keep him out not only for the rest of this season. Obviously, he's shut down. He might not play next season either. That's tough. That's tough because this isn't the first time he's been riddled with injuries. He was hurt a good amount of time when he was on the Pelicans as well. So I'd like to see Lonzo. I'm wishing him a speedy, healthy recovery, man. He is a baller when he's healthy, but that will sting Chicago to be out Lonzo for all of next season already. You're already down one of your big guys or your main guys.
I think that, this goes back to the blown opportunity I saw for Russell Westbrook. I mean, when Chicago was the favorite to land him, I'm like, yeah, like I see that as an ideal situation. He's the lightning to Levine or DeRozan's thunder. And the catches, especially when Ball was out, and he can be considered the catalyst for a potential playoff run. Now they signed Patrick Beverley. But I mean, when you think about the dynamic the dynamic features that Westbrook could bring, it could revamp his career to see him, oh, he's actually valuable for a mid-level playoff team or a low-tier playoff team. And now, with Lonzo being out for a year, I mean, I guess there's a massive gap in the Bulls starting roster, especially when you consider DeRozan and Levine were considered tradable halfway through the season. So now you wonder, do you just break this squad up? When I'm looking at the Bulls depth chart, like they're guard heavy. They actually align DeRozan at the power forward. They have Beverly, Caruso, Levine, DeRozan, and Vucevic. Like that's not a sustainable.
Well, Beverly they got during the trade deadline
Right.
in lieu of Russell Westbrook. But to
Right.
your point, I would agree that I will at least agree and say that I think Chicago becomes an interesting spot for Russell Westbrook because he's essentially established like he's shown up to the Clippers and nothing changed. He has like a twinkle in his eye, but the ball is still not going in the basket. Like he's still dragging that team down a little bit.
Mhm.
So I think unfortunately he's gonna be given a 1-year deal on a team that just is willing to take a flyer. He might get cut during training camp. Like that is in the realm of possibilities for us, Westbrook, which is crazy because we are only 7 years removed, which is a long time in NBA terms, to be honest with you. Damn.
It's pretty long.
7 years
his
removed
MVP?
from his MVP, first of 2 straight seasons where he averaged a triple-double.
Well,
Like he did it twice, guys. Don't forget that. I will call him Westbrook to his face. But bro,
that's what happens when you don't adjust. You don't change your game like Blake Griffin did, where he could start shooting threes when the knees don't respond the way they should. Westbrook never developed a mid range or a long range, and he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that hard place is, like you said, cut during training camp. He should go where he can play and he can collect 1-year contracts until it's time to walk away for good. But this is one of those opportunities where I think he blew it, and the Bulls could have used him.
He just didn't want to pack up his house, man. He wanted to.
That's right. It was lazy. We talked about that last week. I don't blame him. When you've made that much money, I'm like, I ain't moving.
Yeah. I want to ask this because we talked a lot about the stat stuffing that players do when they're on bad teams. Those OKC teams, that was a post KD OKC team. That was way post James Harden when Russ was averaging the triple-double.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a little bit of grain of salt that we should also be adding, saying like, hey man, you're doing a little bit of stat stuffing, brother?
It's no different than what we talked about at the beginning of the show. You talked about Paul Pierce in his early years with not even playoff with first round exit Celtics. You talk about Kobe Bryant between Shaq and Gasol. Westbrook's years where he was triple-double machine. They were borderline. If
they were 6. Like it was the first. The thing that stood out to me about that MVP, I remember, was he was like the first MVP to win it, not being a number 1 seed, because it was like there was a streak for a while, like dude.
The best player on the best team for sure.
Like you had to be a 1
Nowitzki, LeBron,
Dirk, Kobe. LeBron.
Kobe won with a no.
Yeah, Kobe was the number 1 seed. Lakers were the number 1 seed that year in the West. Okay. They lost to the Celtics. Celtics had a better record overall, but Lakers were the 1 seed. Okay. Even D Rose, he was the 1 seed.
That's right. Yeah, 60-win Chicago team. Yeah.
And then the 2 years LeBron won in Miami, they were 1 seeds then. Makes so they Russ 1 seed. Like it was a streak for so long. And then it was because you could not give it to him.
That's right. I mean, triple-double, no Durant, no Harden. They make the playoffs. And, of course, they're expected to lose, which they did. I don't know if it was first or second round. But the catch is he was valuable. But, again, he was doing this stat stuffing, like you said, on a team that probably wasn't going anywhere. But he's like, they're just going to feed me the ball. I'm sorry about that. They're just going to feed me the ball, and I'm going to get they're going to feed me rebounds. I remember times when Steven Adams just got out of the way so Russell Westbrook can get rebounds. It was just a weird time. And, yeah, stat stuffing, it's a matter of Westbrook has always been most successful on a mediocre team. And for him to go to the Clippers, who have higher expectations than being mediocre, I mean, they are 2 games away from being a 4 seed. Not to say they'll get much higher, but they, a first round exit, yeah, would be a failure for them. He needs to be somewhere where he can be a star in basically a poor situation.
Yeah. Let's keep it rolling because we do want to also go over some of these Western Conference playoff races, but there are still a few more key injuries. Just want to highlight Draymond Green. He is out tonight. Andrew Wiggins still has no timetable to return. He's out for personal reasons. Hope everything is okay. That Golden State Warriors team, I was listening to this earlier, and it was from Draymond Green's own mouth, but they were kind of talking about, you may have forgotten, but there was that punch this offseason, Jordan Poole, Draymond Green, that team. You are the defending NBA champions, and the chemistry in that locker room is very clearly shattered. It's not just broken, it is shattered. So I don't have very high hopes for the Warriors. You are a shell of yourselves defensively. I think they will be one of the teams people are disappointed with in the playoffs.
First round out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's no doubt in my mind.
No matter who they play.
I would agree with that.
Because when you're 7-27, I'm looking at that. You know what that means? That means that you don't have home court advantage because you're a 6 seed. That means you're playing 4 games away and 3 games at home. That means all they have to do is say, you know what, we'll just play the law of averages and we're going to beat them every time on our court, which means that no matter if they play the Grizzlies, the Kings, or even the Suns, or however that shakes out, unless they shoot up to the number 4 seed, they're in very big trouble.
I would disagree with you on the notion that even if they have home court advantage, they lose.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying though, because their home road splits are drastic. We talked a little bit about it last week. Like, they're abysmal on the road. They're better at home, but not like they're
good at home.
They're not good. They're not a championship team though.
They're just not a championship.
Like, I remember going to a game last season at the beginning of the year, and like, I'm gonna toot my own horn because we hyped you up a little bit, but like, I have watched so much basketball in my life. Like, it is probably like a little sad if I actually were to tally up how many hours of basketball, professional NBA quality basketball I've watched. And one thing that I've been able to pick up on very well and very easily is that team is a championship caliber team, and that team is not very quickly. Especially if I can physically see you at the stadium. Like, the year after the Lakers won the championship, I remember, like, even watching that first game where they lost to the Clippers, I was watching with some homies and I was like, this is a championship team. I don't get it. We can go 0-10 right now, but if they play all 10 games this well, this cohesively, this team wins a championship. Like, they have it in them. Warriors, it was the same thing. Like, you can see it. The fluidity, how like the system works. People know their roles. People know where to go. It is like a watch that's just, it flows. You don't need it. You're not hearing it. It's not awkward, nothing. Everything knows its place, knows how to move, when to move, and how to do it. Right now, the Lakers are looking like that. 2 months ago, they did not. Warriors this whole year have not. Last season, they look fucking clean. They look good. So I like, my only knock on the idea that like, oh, they're good at home is like, yeah, but they're not. Like, they're not that team. I'm not worried about the Warriors in the way I've been in the past. And you still got Steph. You've still got Clay. Jordan Poole can still reign it when he comes. I don't care. I just don't.
Well, here's the catch. The reason is I do see those stats. Those stats go back to November and December, and you said it before a minute. It's not, and you saying it wasn't unique to you. The season doesn't really even start till December, and I would take that a step further. The season doesn't really, especially when you see the tightness of these standings. The playoff season essentially starts way into the regular season right after the All-Star game. And so I look at I look at the Warriors 29-7 home record, and I'm like, that could have been a little stat stuffing. And when you look at the fact that Andrew Wiggins isn't there, that you have Dante DiVincenzo starting and handling the ball a lot, and he's just not. He's been talking about that. He ain't it. He's not it. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson still doing what they generally do, but they had other pieces in the past, a legitimate Andre Iguodala, a legitimate Draymond Green, and those pieces have faded away. A big man like Andrew Bogut, those pieces aren't there anymore. We're spending a lot of time talking about a first round exit team, and that's exactly what they're going to do because of the same problems that we mentioned before. These teams like who's already out of the play-ins, the Pelicans, they don't have Zion. The Timberwolves don't have Cat. Lakers don't have LeBron. Dallas is missing Luka. All of these teams, the Warriors are missing Wiggins. All of these teams, it's about health. And if they can't, they put their best foot forward with all their players healthy, they are at high risk of even missing the play-ins. And that's critical for most of these teams. With the exception of the Jazz and Thunder, all of these teams are in win now mentality. So it would be really tragic to see the Warriors potentially even miss out on the play-ins.
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna just say let's combine. We've done our deep dive onto the Warriors. I'm gonna bring up some teams now, and I'll bring up if there are injuries. We'll cover them as we start talking about these teams. But just quick rundown on the East. Nothing has changed since last week, with the exception that Miami is starting to find a little bit of a groove. They won 2, the Nets have lost 2, so now the Heat are only a game and a half out of that 6th seed. So my pick on the Nets falling down, the Heat coming out, looking good. Kobe Durant on my other side, looking like a damn fool. In addition to that, you also have the Pacers and the Bulls half game behind the Wizards. So we will see. Beyond nothing has moved. We are at that point where we have some teams have 13, some teams have 11 or 12, some teams have 11 games. So we are in that home stretch. To your point, like this is the last 12 games of the year. So now or never, if you guys really want to. So we're gonna go really focus this time though on the East or on the West. Sorry, Denver Nuggets have locked in playoff bound team. Congratulations to them, fan base. No real injuries on their roster, and I think that is I'm not trying to take points away from them, man, but that's why I think they're in first place. Like, you have every other team in the West has had to deal with serious injury bugs at one point, and the Nuggets, like, hey, Jamal Murray, like back-to-back years, cut short. Like, I'm stoked for you guys, rooting for it. I'm starting to sound disrespectful, but I'm like, okay, if the Lakers play the Nuggets, I think we got a shot.
Every team has a shot in the West. A lot of teams have struggled because of their injuries or them trying to put together their squad, whether it's through trades or free agent signings. But notice those first 2 teams, and the Grizzlies to a degree before Ja went out on GTA 6. But he
okay. He went to a strip club and showed a gun. Like, he didn't kill someone.
Isn't that what GTA 6 is? I mean, or GTA 5? I'm just saying he's writing the sequel to GTA right now.
Bro, like, when I think GTA, I think the dude, like, fucking in the middle of a traffic stop, like, took his gun out, told someone to get out of the car and fucking, like, Grand Theft Auto their car. Like, that's what I think when you say GTA.
Did he not show his gun to the 17-year-old too? I mean, he's doing everything just one step. I mean,
sure.
It counts. Okay.
Full disclosure, Ja comes back Monday. Ja is available to return on Monday in 3 days. Okay. And he's going to ball out on the Mavericks, who will hopefully have both Kyrie and Luka back by then.
He may have found peace. He may have found peace, and then all of a sudden he's just not the same Morant that you knew before.
Honestly, the most interesting thing about the picture of Ja in the strip club. Did you see the picture?
Yeah.
The most interesting thing as I was like looking at it,
Other
I
two
noticed the two guys on the side. I was like, wait, it's
guys.
not a private dance, guys. What?
Some
Like
shady stuff out there,
props to
man.
the stripper because she was dancing in ways that like I hope he was pleased because he spent a lot of money clearly, but like it wasn't even a private room.
That's
Like
his squad, man.
I guess, but genuinely, we made a whole lot of nothing out of a situation where like in a different generate. Like I remember
Of
reading
course.
stories about I forget which player on the Dallas Cowboys it was, but it was back when they were like the Super Bowl winning Dallas Cowboys in the 90s. And I remember reading a story from a sports writer, and he was talking about anytime I interviewed that player, it genuinely would be like, meet me at this strip club, and we wouldn't start talking until he had a stripper dancing in his lap. Like, just Jaw is a victim of the time, unfortunately. But I don't want to get all.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down. We've done that plenty. I want to keep going down.
Okay, so again, so like I was saying, the Kings and Nuggets, they're healthy. Memphis is healthy minus Ja. Ja comes back. They're going to hold on to their three spot. But notice Ja leaves. What happens? Kings bump up to 2. So you have Phoenix again. They lost Durant, but guess what? Everyone else has lost everyone else except for the Clippers, who seem to be healthy. But then it's like
I want to say, let's say top 3 for a second. Like of these top 3 teams, give me an order of just the top 3.
Yeah.
Most likely to like best to worst, or like most likely to get a championship to least likely. Whatever in your head you need to do it. The team you are most afraid to face, least afraid to
Don't
face.
need the Jokic is just a mismatch. He's a problem. Murray is way too confident. So the Nuggets top. Kings are a complete team, as young and inexperienced as they are. They're the type team that could go to the finals and get blown out by the more experienced teams in the East. And then the Grizzlies, I never liked their squad just because it's Ja and the boys. And I just feel like they're going to be living and dying on him.
You're so jealous that Ja is living your life.
Oh my. Guilty.
And it should have been me. I won the Drew League in 2009, guys.
Right. Didn't you see my highlights, bro? I didn't see any Ja highlights on the show today. I'm just saying.
I'll tell you what, bro. If someone shows your highlights on a show that isn't your own, then it counts. It doesn't count if it's your own show.
Hey, man, we're a centralized institution over here. I'm just saying.
One more note on the Kings before we move on to like the real meat where the hunt is happening. The Kings, Kevin Herter, I don't really know how to Herter. He is day to day. He does have a slight strain in his hamstring. That's a bit of a pain in the ass. But these 3 teams are going to be the top 3 teams in the West.
Malik Monk is going to come in and score 40.
Oh, dude, I love Malik Monk. God damn it, Pinka. Anyways, so maybe we see Memphis reclaim the 2 seed. It will be interesting to see from the aspect and selfishly as a Lakers fan, because in my opinion, we're playing one of these 3 teams. We might make it to the 6 seed. We're going to talk about that in a second. More likely, we're going to be a 7 or an 8 seed. So, like personally, I hear you on the Jokic mismatch. I kind of want to play the Nuggets. I'm like so fine playing the Nuggets.
I would rather play the Nuggets than the Kings.
Right? Like the Kings, I feel like would just annoy me because they've been waiting for this moment since 2002, that fan base. So like those games in Sacramento will be a nightmare. And Sacramento, I mean, look, again, I'm talking about like my days. That was the toughest stadium to go into. Like going to Sacramento when they were good and that fan base was showing up for them. They've been starved of playoff basketball for a long time. That is going to be a scary arena to play in. That's just all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, there's no easy matchup, but the Kings are.
AD will lock down Jokic, and Vandy is going to shut down Jamal Murray. And then honestly, LeBron's going to come off the bench. That's how confident I am.
It must be late in the show.
Yeah, it is. It is. We are at the hour, but I want to talk the meat. So, do you still have time to stay on?
I'm on as long as you need.
All right. So, I'm gonna just say at the 4 seed, Phoenix Suns. At the 11, 12, 13 seed, we have the Portland Trail Blazers. From the Suns to the Blazers, that's 6.5. Where it gets interesting is the Lakers and the Thunder tied at 9-10. Lakers at the tiebreaker at 9, Thunder at 10. They are only 4 games back of the Phoenix Suns. So, look, we talked last week, KD. We still got at least 2 more weeks until we hear anything about his timetable. The news coming out of the Lakers right now is that we're supposed to get the update next week, but they're leaking a little bit saying like, oh, it might be a little bit longer. So I think we might not see LeBron until the playoffs, which I'm starting to become very comfortable with. Like I'm genuinely becoming very comfortable with that notion. I want to fill in the gap and then come down back to the Lakers, though, if you'll entertain me that way. So Phoenix Suns, LA Clippers, Golden State Warriors, 4, 5, 6. We talked Warriors. They just lost to the Clippers, which is why the Clippers are 1 game ahead of them. Clippers are 1 game behind the Suns. Now, look, we've been talking about health. Phoenix out KD, Warriors out Wiggins, possibly Draymond. You know who is healthy is the Clippers. Do you think, mind you, they're starting to figure out how to use Russell Westbrook? Honestly,
Both of them are problems.
both of them are on my favorite teams, and both of them were on my favorite teams. One of them, honestly, Russell, terrible name for an athlete right now. You do not want to be an athlete named Russell. Do you think the Clippers have enough to possibly flip the Suns, at least to get home court advantage for the first round of the playoffs?
Again, so they have great bigs. And again, Westbrook is still a professional. He's still a good player. It's just a matter of figuring out how to play with, again, a team that I thought never needed a point guard. With Norman Powell out, does that mean Eric Gordon and Terrence Mann fill his shoes? I don't know. But the catch is that Norman Powell's injury isn't as significant as the other injuries for these teams. So I would say that, yeah, it's LA has an opportunity to get to the 4 seed and claim home court for the first round, which could be key in this playoffs where all these teams are so evenly matched.
No, like playoff basketball is a different sport. And I will never forget during the bubble when Dwayne Wade was kind of talking about like, what team is getting the shortest end of the stick by having to play in the bubble. And Dwayne Wade brought up a very interesting point. And he was like, dude, the Lakers, because it's nothing more than being an NBA player and then coming to LA to play in Staples against the Lakers, and you see all the celebrities in the front row. Like, if you're not accustomed to that, it gets to your head in a way that will rattle you a little bit.
Hands start sweating.
Exactly.
My hands were sweating anytime I was on the floor with guys that I said, oh, I saw him on TV. And even though I was a grown man, it's still like, okay, this is my one shot to say, oh, yeah, I did that against that guy. And then it's like, okay, now I have to fight the hands sweating a little bit. So yeah, if you're not used to it, it will affect you.
Yeah. And like, I hate admitting it, but people do attend Clippers games for some reason. And so like some of these celebrities will go to a Clippers game in the same way that like
Billy Crystal.
So this is an embarrassing thing to admit, but I will admit it by saying I got the tickets for free. So I didn't pay for them. I've never, unfortunately, been fortunate enough to attend a Lakers playoff game, but I have attended a Clippers playoff game because obviously the tickets are that much cheaper. And I'll never forget sitting in the stadium and just being like, this is a playoff atmosphere?
Yeah.
Like, really? This is all we got? Yeah. And like, mind you, LA sports are kind of suck. Like,
yes.
The LA sports in general, like I went
too much going on.
Yeah. Like weird fan bases. We can dissect these another time, but like I'm a Red Sox fan and I went to one of the World Series games when they were playing the Dodgers. And again, like I went with a coworker, and he was even telling me, he's like, dude, I've been to playoff games all over the country. Atmosphere at LA stadiums for any of their teams is always trash because
Right.
it's LA. So you might run into this issue of getting starstruck. Where I think it will backfire is actually if they end up having to play the Phoenix Suns, because Kevin Durant might not be playing. Chris Paul, very accustomed. He was a Clipper, so he is like unfazed by it. Devin Booker was dating Kylie Jenner or Kendall Jenner, one of the Jenners. So it's like he's weirdly like one of the most famous basketball players in the world, not named LeBron James.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're playing against the guys who could handle it, and then the other option possibly is like I'm not necessarily saying that the teams in play in don't have a shot, but I just want to focus them like the Warriors again, Steph, Clay, Draymond, Andrew Wiggins. Like these guys are the defending NBA champs. Like they can handle Billy Crystal and Frankie Muniz sitting in the front row of a Clippers game. So I actually would say that like this is my whole thing on the Clippers. You have the opportunity to get home court advantage. If you cannot get it done, you essentially establish to me you are a first round and out for the playoffs. Do you think there's a shot if the Clippers just stay in the 5 seed that they could get out of the first round?
Honestly, yeah, I do think that they have a coin flip. If Durant is back, no, I mean Phoenix is going to be fine for a first round. If Durant's not back, then I think that the Clippers have more than a coin flips chance, probably 55 or 60% chance of beating Phoenix, because it's just manpower. Like it's just going to get the rotations are going to shrink. You're going to see more of Kawhi, more of PG. You're going to see zero of KD. It's just a game of numbers by then.
Valid.
Yeah.
Valid.
Yeah.
We will, we'll keep an eye on it. We got about 2 more
KD,
weeks left in the NBA
KD watch.
season, so it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. But let's now move down to this play-in. So again, worth noting. So the Phoenix Suns have 1-game lead on the Clippers. Clippers have a 1-game lead on the Warriors. That means only 2 games separate Warriors and Suns, 4-6. The Suns only have a 1-game lead over both the Minnesota Timberwolves at 7 and the Dallas Mavericks at 8, who they only have a 1-game lead over the Lakers and Thunder, who are at 9 and 10 respectively. So that's how tight things are. Like tonight, the Lakers and Mavs play. Lakers win, they will flip the Mavs, and the Lakers are now the 8th seed. Mavs are down to 9 very quickly. Look, Karl Anthony Towns still not back. Should be coming back in the next week or 2. I'm expecting Kyrie to play tonight. Luka, I expect to play, if not by this weekend, at least Monday night against the Grizzlies. I would be surprised if he does not play. The news that we're hearing, obviously, we mentioned LeBron possibly out longer than anticipated. To be honest, of those 3 teams that I've mentioned, at this point, I am least concerned with LeBron being out longer. I actually think it is better because it gives the new guys the Lakers acquired more time to get used to playing with AD, get used to playing with Russ or D'Angelo Russell. Like those guys can generate something, and LeBron James is the caliber of player that you can slide him back in. And if he needs to be like, oh, I need to step away from the ball, let my guys cook, like he is the type of player leader who I feel confident is going to know, hey, he's been egging AD on. This needs to be your team. I cannot at 38 years old be the guy. I will be the guy for the playoff run, sure, but I'm not going to be the guy. So Homer shit aside, I genuinely think the Lakers get out of the play-in. Like I actually believe that they will.
I think you have a good general synopsis of it. The problem is that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams fighting generally for, I don't count the Phoenix Suns and that Clippers down to the Pelicans, fighting for those potential, what, 5 to 6 spots. It turns into a dice roll where any blown game like the Lakers playing, was it the Magic or the Bulls? I forgot.
Dude, they lost the
The
Rockets.
Rockets, even worse.
Second worst team in the NBA. It's absolute shit. I will let you finish. Sorry, and then I will
Yeah,
share
no, it's
my
okay.
take.
And I hear your frustration, but those are the kind of things where it's like, okay, well, now you have to beat Dallas, because now we start getting into tiebreakers, and it's like I think they go by head-to-head matchups, and these games against your near rivals are critical because they're gonna factor out whether you place above them or below them. That can be home court advantage. That can mean you're facing the Kings rather than the Nuggets. And that's the type of gamemanship that we'll probably see the last 3 games of the playoffs, especially on the East Coast or higher end on the West Coast. Teams probably jockeying for, what team do they want to face in the first round? The Lakers don't have that luxury. They need to win every game, and I think that they'll win tonight. It says Kyrie is doubtful, and unless you have some more information beyond simple ESPN,
All I had was that he participated in the shoot around.
I think shoot around is one thing. Running up and down trying to chase, Beasley and D'Angelo is another, especially when he wants to be offensive minded. I do think that he'll probably sit out. As critical as that is, I think
I'm fucking fine with that, man.
yeah,
Like,
if they're probably going to think if he hurts himself more, they're screwed longer term. If I was Dallas, I'd say one more game.
hey, I'm all for it. I mean, that's the logic, though, to defend the Lakers. Like, I'm actually like, you're right. This is the second worst team in the NBA, the worst team in the West. That should have been a win, even without AD. We would be 500. We would be tied with Minnesota and Dallas. I think we only have one tiebreaker there. Like, I think actually tonight's game against Dallas will decide who has the tiebreaker over the other, because I think we've split the season series so far. So, like, there is that side of it, absolutely. But AD is still on a minutes restriction. They are not playing him in back-to-back games, and that's why he didn't play. I'm of the notion that if we lost AD because he got hurt against the Rockets, I would be furious. I'm comfortable not playing AD and rolling the dice on a game against the last team that we don't need the tiebreaker on. But now let me flip it and say we actually were supposed to play Dallas in the back-to-back, and Houston was just sort of like we have a rest day in between. Even if Kyrie and Luka are out, I would have wanted AD to play in that.
Yes. And the catch in what you're saying, I didn't know that rule that they were putting forth no back-to-backs for him.
No one did. No one knew that until the team came out and said, this is a coach's decision. We're not going to play AD tonight.
That's their last back-to-back, so expect AD for the rest of the. Oh, I'm sorry, they have one April 4th through the 2nd, April 4th and 5th, Utah and Clippers. Hopefully by that time,
he needs to play both of those.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, AD.
If anyone, maybe Utah. I think at that point we will see that Utah will be one of those teams that have separated themselves from the actual playoff race. Just like I mentioned before, their incentives aren't to make the playoffs. So I do see that they will. I think that they will likely sit him that game and then play him against the Clippers. But that's my projection.
We'll see. Minnesota, they've been struggling a little bit. Gobert is also out for right now. Maybe I'm sleeping on it, but I unfortunately think these teams are just a byproduct of the long season, and we're gonna see. I think we're just gonna see the Lakers I'm gonna put the same pressure on the Lakers that I sort of put on the Clippers. You have this opportunity to move up. And if you don't, my expectations for you diminish. I genuinely think if the Lakers are not playing at least for the 7th seed, i.e., if they're not either the 7th or 8th seed, or better, like Lakers have a genuine shot to get up to that 6th seed, and that would be excellent. Honestly, even if you have to play the Sacramento Kings, if you get up to the 6th seed, for what that will do for that team's chemistry, psychology. Hey guys, we were out.
Hit the
And
ground running.
like that is the scariest 6th seed. That is a scary 6th seed. So I will put the onus on the Lakers and say you need to finish at least the 8th seed or better to then make me convinced like you have what it takes to make a run here. You can lose. You can play in that first play-in game for a shot at the 7th seed, and you can lose that game and end up the 8th seed. And I still think you have a shot, but you need to at least be playing for that 7th seed. You need to keep rising in this. Job's not finished. All right. The GOAT said it himself. Job's not finished. All right. So
Which GOAT?
Yeah, you know which shut. So I want to go one direction first because you sort of brought up Utah. Your expectations are, as we wind down this season, they've got 13 games left. They will sort of diminish and fall out of the picture. One team that very much I think I'm writing an end to their season is going to be the Portland Trailblazers. Damian Lillard is potentially out for a significant amount of time. They're already 2 games behind just the Jazz, 2.5 behind the Thunder. I don't think that team without Damian Lillard makes a dent. And then from what I read, if they don't win a few games here, they may just opt to shut Dame down for the rest of the season and let him sort of just get healthy. So I will see your Jazz and raise you Portland Trailblazers are out, which means sort of I've ignored and disrespected the Thunder because I still can't believe the Thunder are irrelevant. And then the Pelicans. Those 2, and then I guess we should count the Lakers. So 9, 10, and then technically the Pelicans are down in, or wait, did I get that right? Yeah, the Pelicans are down in 12th, Thunder in 10th. Those 3 teams are sort of jockeying down there. For me, it's Pelicans, Thunder. Zion is still out for a couple of weeks. I unfortunately think that team, despite the fact that you got BI, despite the team that, you have the right pieces there, I just think Shai is balling in a way. Like, some players just ball out. Shai is going to will that team in. And I don't think the Pelicans will get it.
The Pelicans aren't the Pelicans have the right pieces with Zion there, and they don't have Zion, so therefore they aren't full, and they are the clearest example of what happens when you don't have a healthy team. The Thunder have a healthy team, but they, like you say, you don't know why you're ignoring them because they just aren't that good. But but they're young. They can make 3-pointers, and their point guard is probably, without biases, he's probably one of the top 10 players in the league. So it's like that's just a matter of we'll probably look back at him. He's
going to finish top 10 in MVP voting this season, but I don't think he's a genuinely a top 10 NBA. Like,
let me scale that back. When I mean top 10 in terms of contribution to your team's success. Okay, so he is the reason why his team is winning any games at all. Without him, they would be down there with the Rockets somewhere. So they have solid young pieces, but it's him who glues it together. He's the glue and the driving force. That makes him a young star that's just psychotically interesting. But they're also just understaffed, undermanned. In my opinion, that they probably, even if they make it the 10th spot, they'll be an easy out.
Yeah, I based on the 5 teams we've named, I want to add the Pelicans in this batch. So the 4 play-in teams, Minnesota, Dallas, Lakers, Thunder, and the Pelicans. What are the 2 teams most likely to actually become the part of the 8 playoff teams? Because only two of those teams, like even if you finish seventh, like if you lose both playing games,
You're talking
you're
about
out.
these five. Who are the top? Who are the last two coming in? I
Yeah,
mean,
who
honestly,
right now with 12 games
I
left.
see Dallas and the Lakers. I mean, that's what people probably want,
This is
but
what the NBA wants.
that's what the NBA wants. I don't see Minnesota being a real team without Cat. And I think that as LeBron comes, even if LeBron doesn't come back, they're still a better team than the Timberwolves. I think if the Timberwolves and Lakers matched up in a best of five per se right now, Lakers will win. And the same thing with Dallas. Now, mind you, all that goes out the window if all of a sudden Kyrie's injury gets worse or Luka is limping. So I'm just assuming that players come back when they're supposed to. But yeah, the good thing about the Lakers is that they are getting better at the right time. And that leads to potential upsets. That leads to those teams like those hockey teams where they're the 8th seed and they get to the Stanley Cup, or that baseball team that adds a pitcher at the end of the All-Star break. All of a sudden they're a World Series team and they barely made the playoffs. These are the kind of things. The Lakers changed their squad and all of a sudden they look like wow, which is what I said. I liked Beasley, Vanderbilt. I like AD having an opportunity to play without LeBron. And now you enter LeBron with you, as you say, he can come back and just be the right star for the team, allow his players to cook per se. It's a team that could beat Denver. And again, that's maybe the fan coming out, but yeah, they can actually. They're not the same LA team that was 25 and 32.
Yeah, I will say a potential Minnesota Lakers matchup in a play-in tournament would be very interesting, given the fact that we now have D'Angelo Russell, and Vanderbilt. So,
and you really think that Cat is just going to come back? If he's coming back for the beginning of the playoffs, you think he's going to be ready the way that a veteran LeBron would be?
no.
Yeah. Or the same thing with Zion, coming back it's just different.
But I will caveat and say there is a potential that LeBron does something similar to AD in 2021, where he comes back as I came back at a game early. Like AD forced himself to come back in that series against Phoenix, and I applaud him for it, because genuinely that series and the fact that AD went down to the Lakers turned into what they turned into as a result confirmed for me that if we were healthy, we were going to go back to back that year. Like, fair. Genuinely, we just, unfortunately, AD broke down. Yeah. So, but that, unless there's anything else your heart desires, I think that about does it for us, my dude.
It's a great time to be an NBA fan. And, every week it's a completely different looking standings and with all the injuries. And we're going to be back here next week to talk about all the changes, because something's going to happen.
I hope so, because literally the Eastern Conference playoff standings were identical to last week's.
And Brooklyn may bump out, but guess what?
Finally.
That's a small change.
I'm going to win that bet. This has been another episode of the Bitcoin Ballers. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe down below. We will be back next week at a time and place of our choosing.